Hi everyone, my name is Brian Sun. I'm a consultant in Red Hat, but I'm also a community manager and then writer for opensource.com. In this article, I'm going to talk about design pattern. And the design pattern is a kind of a best practice, way to implement the best practice when you write a code or design a code in such a way that your code project to be more reusable and then more easier to change over time. And how you do that is by making sure to separate the code that stay the same, more likely to stay the same over time versus code pieces that are more likely to change over time. By separating those two different ways, you can make sure that your code to be more reusable and more likely easier to change over time, better than making spaghetti code. So there are many design patterns out there and many different best practice design patterns, but I'm going to talk about 3 different design patterns in this article, this video. First one is called Singleton Pattern, is way to instantiate object in efficient way. Second design pattern is called Factory Pattern, is way to create an object to be making sure that your code your logic doesn't expose. And the last one is Observer Pattern, which is making sure that you get notified whenever something changes when you subscribe to the topic. And there are many design patterns out there, facade, and then facade, template, and cloud design patterns. But I'm going to talk about those 3 in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So before getting started, I want to show you that there are sample code I put inside my GitHub repository. It's called opensource.com demos/top design patterns. My intention is I'm going to put other project samples out there as I write other article, but for this video and this article, I put my source code inside here, so you can find a sample project here. Then you can test it out yourself by importing using your IDE, whether it's IntelliJ or Eclipse. It's based on the Java project using Apache Maven. So you can see the simple Apache Maven, the pom.xml is here. But so a lot of the code is inside the breakdown by source code, the factory, observer, and singleton, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. And then there's the test opensource.com, which is the main thing you're gonna run as a JUnit test. So making sure you compile and then using the Maven build, and make sure to run it. And then that's kind of a code where you can download it and clone into your local repo and then test it out yourself. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so what is a singleton? Singleton design pattern is kind of way to help with how you design or create an object or instantiate an object. So think about typical Java or Symbol, like other programming languages, to create an object out there. So when you create an object, the typical things to do is that you create a constructor to create an object inside a class. And then when you call to create a new object, and then it returns a new object. When you call second time, it returns another new object. And then third time, it's the same, and so forth. So that all the instances are instance 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Every time you call to create a new object or instantiate a new object, they're all different instantiations. So that they have different IDs and different memory address and then so forth. This is kind of useful in some sense, but there are some situations when you don't want to do that. And then so that singleton kind of introduced an idea that when you create a new object, you don't want to create a new object every single time. You only create a new object at the first time when you call. So the next time when you call to that new object or you call the get instance class or any other methods, this kind of named similar way, then when you just return the object you created, instantiated earlier. So when you see it here in the diagram, when you create a new object for the first time, it returns from the constructor and stores the information in the field inside the class as a private. And then when the client or when you call it a second time to get a new instance, it just simply return from the data you created earlier and or object you created earlier and so forth. So that it is all instance 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth are essentially the same. So that's the kind of basic idea behind the singleton. And it's this kind of popular design pattern implemented by default in the Spring framework and the many other idea out there. It's kind of different from static, which is, if you are familiar with the Java, static like a field type in Java, because it doesn't always guarantee that the static is creating the states the same. There are some situations states are different. So singleton is kind of useful. There are some the downside of singleton as well, but it's by itself it's good to know, and it's good design pattern that's good to learn about it. So I just imported my cloned project from GitHub, and here you go. When you expand into and you import it as your Apache Maven project, you'll be able to find the structure that is based on the Apache Maven. And then there is a pom.xml here, which is just importing the dependency for the JUnit. So once you are learning imported project and everything's fine, let me explore the singleton pattern, which I implement here. So when you're under the source main Java and then the package name, you will be able to find 3 different design patterns arranged by the directory, factory, observer, and singleton. And there are essentially 2 classes under singleton, which is what we are going to see at first here. And open source singleton is a basic implementation of singleton. It doesn't really do anything with concern about thread. So it's not thread safe, but it's the simplest ways to demonstrate what is singleton. Second one is called improved open source singleton. Is kind of making sure that is double check locking for thread safety. So open source singleton is basically what it does is that it's basically implement a singleton. Simplest way by making sure that when you call this class, when you visit unique instance will be null, so it will create a new object. But when you call second time, you will be able to return the instance you created earlier. And improved open source singleton is kind of similar implementation, except it is implement for thread safety. Again, I think when you're using Spring framework or other things out there are maybe implementation there in the framework itself, but this kind of way to implementing that. So the main things we're going to use over and over in this demo is that we're going to use it. The test open source, which is you take JUnit test file inside the source /test/Java, and we can learn each one by one. So first we are going to learn the test singleton returns same instance. That's going to just learn the simple singleton instance demo. And it will just verify that it says instance is same. You will create first object, which is the object we created first time, and second object will be just returning the same object, and then it just verifies it's true. So it returns true. As you can see that verification comes as true. And second one is we're going to learn test improve singleton, which is the code you see earlier, which is for thread safety implemented. Thread safety. Again, this is returning the same. and you can learn each unit test by right click and then learn that specific method. It should work for the same for Eclipse or any other IDE out there. Yeah, that's it for the demo. So the factory pattern is very famous or popular design pattern. So idea behind the factory pattern is there are different ways to implement the factory pattern, and I'm just showing you a very simple factory pattern, which is just nothing but create a new object. So the idea behind it is instead of you create an object directly by calling the implementation class, you expose you create another layer called the factory class, and they kind of does the delegating. It does the job of delegating to create an object. So your client, which means that you're the one actually calling the method to create I want to create a new object. Instead of creating the implementation for the object directly, you call to create a new factory. And from there, you ask it to get a certain type of what you want to create. Then when you call the actual factory to create the class of type X, and then the factory looks up for the class of a type X, and there's an exposed interface which is abstract class, and there's many other classes that implement that interface. Implementation class type 1, type 2. Based on the type, it returns the type of X. So important thing to know about is if you know about object-oriented programming in general, is that interface or abstract class is just that shows that blueprint of the implementation. It doesn't really do any given implementation details. Then it's so that basically other class, the implementation class, can inherit the type, so that the interface. So it can be kind of like this type is actually can be part of that interface. Then once you return the type X, then you create a new object of a type X. So factory pattern essentially create an object without exposing the creation logic to clients. So that's kind of simple in the idea. So I mean, it's very simple concept, but it's very useful. So here I'm going to show the factory pattern implementation. So under the same project we imported earlier, we have expanded the package for factory, and you will see that there are different classes out there, total of 5. And so essentially what we're going to start is going to show the implementation for factory layer. So factory pattern is essentially the most important things, and it does it by it's basically get the name from the client, and based on the name, there's a conditional statement to create a new object. Whether it's a Tomcat, Jetty, or Firefly, it delegates to create a new object based on and they all implement open source JVM servers, and then returns to the client. So when you look at the open source JVM server, essentially it's this interface, or you can think as an abstract class. And you can pretty much put anything there, but I put the start server, stop server, and get name, because when you think about any like open source server or any server application server, it always needs a job, always starting server, stop the server. So that's kind of why it's there. But you notice that there's no implementation there. Implementation is done by the class that implements this interface. So let's look at that. So Jetty is implement open source JVM server, same as Tomcat and Firefly. So start server is just an actual, just print out the message. It's starting the Jetty server, stop the server, the similar, and stop shutting down Jetty server, and returns the name the Jetty. And Tomcat is similar, except that it just reprint out Tomcat server. And the Firefly, which is Red Hat, is starting Firefly server and shutting down Firefly server and return Firefly. So everything is driven by the task class, which we shown earlier, which is under source/test/java. And then there are 3 test methods. I put it down here, which is run Eclipse Jetty, run Apache Tomcat, and run Red Hat Wi-Fi. So when you pass Eclipse, it will return Jetty, and then it will print out this message starting the server and stop the server for Jetty. So let's start on this. You can right click and then learn it, and it will choose to learn it. Notice that because we are learning the Jetty and assert equals returns true, so otherwise it will fail. Also, you notice that starting Jetty server and shutting down Jetty server. Same for the Tomcat. You can right click and run it, no problem there. And then same thing for Wi-Fi, and that's done. So last design pattern I'm going to show you is observer pattern, and so basically what it does is that it's kind of similar to what you see in messaging queue or anything like Kafka or Revit MQ, and there are many Apache MQ, AMQ, and there are different messaging queue out there. Idea behind the you subscribe to a topic, and then you can call it a subject, as you can see here. And there are different topics implementations. If you think about it like a magazine subscription or a mailing list, you might be interested in subscribing to a computer, technology, or stock market, or like international relationship, or government or politics. You subscribe to interesting topics, and then you basically add what kind of things you want to subscribe to. And then when you then based on that, there is observer, which is you kind of listen to the subject. If anything changes, then you get notified through the means, which is kind of observer you see out there 1 and 2. So basically, first thing you do is that you basically see as observer, kind of seeing that I want to be notified in such a way, and then you add topics that you want to implement, you want to be notified about, whether it is government or computer technology or open source. Then if some is observer keep listening to subject, if something changes, and then it notified. So this kind of implementation. So as far as the observer pattern goes, I've expanded this observer directory here. There are different classes implementation classes you will see here. There's this topic which is called the subject. So it's you can skip it to making sure that you can just replace with implementation by decide to make it into interface. This is kind of optional, but and then it have an add observer and then different things. But you see that notify observers there. When you look at the implementation, the one implement is called the conference, but you can name any things. And basically it does the implementation of the adding observer. Basically it keeps track of the list of observer, and then you basically add the observer there, and there's a delete observer which is not really getting used, but I will still put it there, and it can notify observer as well, which is basically calls the observer update, and which I'm going to show there. So basically what it does is that essentially that, and then observer, let's look at observer first. Observer is also interface that basically what it does is that is updated, and there are different observer like calculate speakers, which is calculate the how many percentage speakers are there, and there is the monitor conference attendees, which is basically nothing but printing out. But this is essentially what implement the update function, basically update with the new values, and then it print out the information, basically implementation for this class. So once the client calls to set the conference details, and is this implement topic, and then it basically calls to notify observer. So based on the number of servers out there, keep tracking of this list, it basically update, and then it calls the specific observer for this observer implementation. So let's learn this in our test code. So there's only just one method. I'm going to run this. So you can see that it print out 10 speaker, 20 attendees. This is coming from monitor conference attendees, and 50% speakers is coming from the calculated speakers. And you see that how I created first thing is the topic, and then observer, and then there is different observer, calculated speakers, and then I'm going to just call the new conference, which is the implementing the topic. So yeah, and if anything changes, then it will print out the message as well. So I'm going to learn entire test class just for the sake of demonstrating. You can see all the things get printed out at the same time. So that's it. Thank you for. So yes, so that's it. And I have also have other articles through opensource.com. So if you don't follow, there's opensource.com/users and BRSON. And you can find other articles regarding DevOps and something about machine learnings and etc. So if you're interested in it, please check out. So thank you for watching, and then I put my GitHub repository link here, and you can again check out my other articles here in the opensource.com/users and BRSON. And I'm going to publish other videos, tutorial video and so forth later on. And then yeah, just if you want to follow, and please be subscribed to my YouTube channel. And thank you for watching again, and have a great day.